Usability, achieving your purpose. When you talk about usability, what you're really talking about is effective technical documentation. So according to ISO, usability has three prongs. The first is effectiveness. Does your documentation achieve its intended goals? The second is efficiency. Is the information readily found and relatively easy to digest? And the third is satisfaction. Does your technical documentation meet the user's expectations? Also, does it match the user's level of preparedness? So, all three of these things, it's important to remember who is your audience and what is the purpose of your documentation. When you talk about the dimensions of text usability, you really can look at three different things. Is it relevant? Is it easy to understand? And perhaps as important as anything, is it easy to find? When we talk about relevancy, it's important to remember that technical documentation is task-oriented. So most people read technical writing in order to perform an activity in the future. If you think about things like work instructions, it's not being read for fun, it's being read because I have something that I need to do and I'm able to need to do it correctly. Your documentation needs to be accurate. Information should be factual, it should be reliable. It should also be complete. Nothing should be omitted. All steps should be there without any extraneous information. If I go back to work instructions, are the steps easy to follow? Are all small steps included? And have I not put anything in there that will confuse the person who will be using my technical documentation? It should also be easy to understand. It should be clear. You should have unambiguous language, and that language should understand cultural differences. It should use language that is appropriate to the level of understanding of the audience. If you're writing for 10th graders, that information should be in 10th grade language. If you're writing for software developers, the same thing applies. It should be concrete. You should use models, example, and pictures to help establish understanding. More and more people are also using videos, embedding videos into their instructions in order for people to have a visual representation of what the documentation is trying to refer to the reader. It should also be well styled. We talk about style guides in this class. We will be working on them, but there are examples for style guides all over the internet. Just generally speaking, the rationale for a style guide is to organize information in an intuitive way. In other words, does it make it easy for the reader to find what they're looking for? So, building on that, your technical documentation should be organized. It should be structured in a way that makes sense. It should be cross-referenced properly. And it should be standardized. If we think about communities like ISO, they give very concrete criteria relative to how documents should look. So the standardization is built in via the auditing agency. Information should be retrievable. Once again, you want to think about chunking information. Signals to the reader should be obvious. They should make sense. So you think about things like graphics, headings, all those should be obvious. They should be visually effective. Shouldn't be cluttered. And transitions are made clear with these changes in text and with graphics. Of course, anytime we do documentation, we want to always keep revision in mind. Usability is increased iteratively. So if we go back to the iterative approach, we are always creating documentation with an eye towards looking at improving it. Repeated revisions of drafts should then improve the usability. One reason we have a revision history in documentation is to look back, see where we have come and where we are going. One key to remember is that information and users change, and documentation needs to change in parallel. This is more so the case now than ever before. So finally, when we think about testing usability, Your documentation should be reviewed by all major contributors. Technical documentation is almost always collaborative. So if I use my work instructions example again, you will usually have the person who writes it, you will have the end users who are involved, you will have perhaps the area manager being involved, you will have engineers involved. All of those people need to review it, all of those people need to be invested in that documentation. If you talk about end user testing, for work instructions, the documentation should be tested not only with experienced users, but also with inexperienced users. This tests the completeness and clarity of the documentation. I can't emphasize this enough. One failing that people have or encounter relative to creating work instructions, for example, is that they will do end user testing with people who have a lot of expertise. This is a good idea at the document's inception. It allows you to set most of the framework, but the problem is that a lot of times that people have a lot of experience, then they easily overlook small steps. So it's important to also test with inexperienced users. The last thing to remember is that good documentation allows the user to find what they need, understand what they have found, and it allows them to act appropriately on this understanding.